Well, most probably all of us here are familiar with what love is. It's an age-old word used usually to identify a relationship between a man and a woman, and it can be from the first capture of the heart, and we call it, I guess you have the saying here, swept off the feet. You have that term here. And it could be to a golden wedding, 50 years. Sue, you have that by experience, 50 years, or some to a diamond wedding, 60 years, or some to a platinum wedding, 70 years of marriage. Or it can be identified with a passion for things other than human beings, like love for animals. And I don't know, Elizabeth, whether you have a real passion and a love for Sierra or not, but she's a determined dog. Or it could be a love for hobbies of interest, possibly. But there will be those of us here today who can say that they have given their heart to others or another person, and they have no regrets at all. Yes, perhaps differences and struggles, but no regrets. And there is no doubt one or more of you who have pursued love and it has resulted in trauma, regret, and hurt. You see, true love is not a swept off your feet momentary experience. There is always risk in love, always. Love to another person always places you in a vulnerable position. It requires you giving out of yourself and exposing your very innermost self, your whole private person, to someone else. True love cautions. True love reprimands. It disciplines because it looks for the long-term good for another, being a husband or a wife, a child, a family, or even friends. It does not take advantage of the other person for an immediate moment of pleasure. And true love will not betray the privacy and the trust of one who has exposed themselves to their spouse or a confidant. But now we add another dimension to love, and that is love and law. And to take it a step further, as we have on our screen, the love fulfilling the law. This changes the thoughts on love somewhat, because even though in what we see in our days as normal love, there are rights and there are wrongs. But when we add the word law, it brings those rights and wrongs much closer to home. So if love is the fulfillment of the law, we need to establish what true love really is. And there's a whole chapter devoted to it. You know it, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. It's well known, and you can follow through if you like, as I'm just giving a summary of this chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. If you are a great orator and have a way with words, if you know all the Bible prophecies, if you understand the great mysteries of life, if you even have a great faith, if you give your wealth to the poor, if you give up your body as sacrifice to whatever cause, but if you don't have a godly, genuine love, it really amounts to how much? Nothing. Because, the chapter goes on, real love endures. It shows kindness. It doesn't envy when others may gain and you seem to be on the back foot. It doesn't push itself in front of others. It doesn't puff itself up. It is modest and it's humble in its behaviour. It doesn't react when provoked. It does not rejoice in sin. It does rejoice in truth. It never fails. And when everything else does, it doesn't fail. It may seem as if we are looking into something that's hard to comprehend, but we will face true love in reality one day very soon. Out of faith, hope and charity, charity or love is the greatest gift. So there is a definition of what love really is. But there's more to genuine love. And the best place to go to find out more about love is to the disciple that wrote with his pen dipped in love, and that is the disciple of John, the disciple that Jesus loved. We need to move just from definition of what love is to the morals and the heart of love and humanity. In the Gospel of John, that word love, loved, or loveth is recorded 51 times. That's 51 times in 21 chapters. But in 1 John, the word love, loved, or loveth is recorded 46 times in just 5 chapters. But the greatest of these is chapter 4, where these words are recorded 27 times in 21 verses. 1 John chapter 4. I want to look at some of these. I want to look at 2 blocks of text in 1 John chapter 4. We're going to look at verses 7 to 12 initially, and I want you to start and understand the concept of love. 1 John chapter 4, 7 to 12. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God. And everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. In this was manifested the love of God towards us, because that God sent his only begotten Son into the world, that we might live through him. Herein is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us, and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. In verse 11, Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. No man hath seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Come to verse 16 through to 21. And we have known and believed that love that God has to us, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love loveth in God, and God in him. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in the world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear has torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God who is not seen? And this commandment have we from him, that he who loveth God loveth his brother also. Wow, there's a lot of love in that chapter. So in all this, that is real, where real love is found, even though there may be many more references to the Bible, and I appreciate that, but that's what we're focused on. So this chapter identifies real godly love. The love we were designed and made to receive, and in turn to diffuse back out. But in all honesty, do you really comprehend what we've just read? Do you understand what real, true love really is? And as Jonathan brought out in Sabbath school, mothers may have a better comprehension than fathers, or women or men who have never parented a family, possibly. But the one that you brought into this world, doesn't that give you a binding and a binding, gluing love for that child. I remember when Angela had our children, the pain was incredible, but you soon forgot the pain. God understood this. In Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 15, we have these words. Isaiah 49:15, we have, "Can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet I will not forget thee." Are there mothers who do forsake their children? Sadly, that is the case, yes. The word love, in this sense, here in this verse, it's a foundational love, an underpinning connection that bolts or glues two people or more together. But that same love, when it sees danger approaching the loved one, disciplines out of their love for their loved one. And that discipline may hurt and even offend, wound, or even crush. The receiver of the discipline may be horrified at this rebuke, short term. But the lover moves out of passion for the long-term love for their lover. So now, if loving is going to be the fulfillment of the law, what law is it going to fulfill? Well, the foundation of the law is found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 to 17. And I would encourage each one of you to memorize the 10 Commandments. You just might never know when you need them. You may be surprised. I had an experience in March of this year because at home I may have mentioned that we have a bit of a choir. It's a wee bit of a bush choir, but it works. And we take it into the prisons and we also go into a rest home. The last time in March, we were in a rest home. After the presentation was finished, a dear elderly lady beckoned me over. She said, "Come over." I said, "Sure. Do you know the 10 Commandments?" I said, "Yeah, I do actually." "Can you recite them?" I said, "I can, but I've got a head full of narration and song right now, but I will do it." And I recited the full 10 Commandments to her. And she said, "Well, you know, I've asked a lot of people, Christians that have come into this rest home, if they know the 10 Commandments, and nobody's been able to do it." Now, I wasn't proud of it, but I was grateful that I'd learned it. The problem is with myself is that when I can't sleep at night, that's when I recite the Commandments, Psalm 23, Psalms 91, and the 3 angels' messages. We've done others, but I've forgotten them. Psalms chapter 8's a beautiful psalm. And the trouble is, as I go through these, I start falling asleep, but I'm reciting them to go to sleep, but as I'm going to sleep, I want to keep going. So it gets a bit broken up in the head. But I managed to get all the way through the 10 Commandments. She was impressed. But that's not what we do it for. But look, know the commandments because it's the foundation of what your life is. These 10 commandments make up one law. The law was instituted right at the beginning of the creation of this world. In fact, it existed before this world was created. And we have these words here, before this earth was called into being, God's law existed. Very clear, plain, obvious. It's clear. I add more to that. Jesus, the express image of the Father's person, the effulgence. Well, that's a big word. I had no idea what it meant, but it means brilliant radiance of his glory. So we'll change that. Jesus, the express image of his Father person, the brilliant radiance of his glory. The self-denying Redeemer throughout his pilgrimage of love to this earth was a living representative of the character of the law of God. In his life, it is made manifest the heaven-born love. Christ-like principles underlie the laws of eternal rectitude, or that word is right. This law is the very character of God himself, who was the one who originally gave the law of the Ten Commandments. He is the law of the Ten Commandments. That's who he is. But as far as we are concerned, it was given to and for the benefit of all humanity, even human beings who have never lived on the face of the earth. Every human being who has lived on the face of the earth. So what is that law like? Now you can turn to Psalms 19 with me, and I think they're actually all on the screen here because I want to just go through them fairly fast. The law of the Lord is what? Perfect. How can you better the law of the Lord if it's perfect? You can't. And what does it do? Converting the soul. So that's very clear. The law of God is perfect. But converting to what? Now, there are other words in the psalm that come under that word law, which include morals and principles. It goes on. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever, and the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Wow, that's quite a statement. If we embrace all these attributes of God, then what will be the result? Well, look at the next verse. Verse 10, it says, more to be desired are they than gold, yea, much fine gold, sweeter also than honey in the honeycomb. Now, I'd say some of you have learnt that song. Yes. Yeah. You're singing it as we say it. And verse 11, moreover, by them is the servant warned, and in keeping of them there is what? Great reward. Well, but wait, there's more. If we go to Romans chapter 7 and verse 12, I think I put that up here as well. Wherefore the law is what? Holy. So the law is perfect, now the law is holy, and the commandment holy, but also just and good. 1 Timothy also has this to say in 1 Timothy 1 verse 8, but we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully. So we've identified the law and what it looks like. Now, at the beginning of the re-giving of the law at Mount Sinai, who spoke? How do you know? That's why you need to memorize the Ten Commandments. And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God. That's God that spoke. He spoke those commandments. When Jesus was here on earth in his mission and ministry to regain humanity, did God through Jesus uphold his law? Matthew 5, 17 to 19. We have these words. Look them up with me. You'll most probably know them just about off by heart. Matthew 5, 17 to 19. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to what? Fulfill. Exactly. 18. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of the least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So there is no hint of change from Sinai till Jesus' ministry. No hint. Not a cross of the T or the dot of the I would be changed. Nothing. It was exactly as it was given some 1,500 years later. Jesus elsewhere verifies and endorses this same law in Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 to 40. I encourage you to look that up with me. Matthew 22, 34 to 40, and I give you a lead into this. It says, "But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together." Verse 35, "Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him, saying, 'Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' And Jesus said unto him, 'Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets.'" So, on those thoughts and what's just been read there, did Jesus just summarize the first 4 commandments from Exodus 20 as he was speaking? Did he? Well, yeah, he did. He just summarized them, but it was based more on word for word from somewhere else. And you come with me to Deuteronomy chapter 6 and 1 to 5. Deuteronomy 6, 1 to 5. Did Jesus just summarize those first 4 commandments? Yes, but it's more direct. Deuteronomy 6, 1 to 5, and I give you a lead in as well. "Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess. That thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments which I commanded thee, thou and thy son and thy son's sons, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, that thou may increase mightily, as the Lord God of thy fathers has promised thee in the land which floweth with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord." And look at verse 5. "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might." There are the actual words that Jesus spoke to that young Pharisee. Jesus basically quoted word from Deuteronomy. But read on. Look at verse 6. "And these words which I command thee this day shall be where? In thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently to thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." In other words, you will live them. Verse 8, "And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates." These commandments are absolutely essential. Those who love God with all their heart and soul and might will be his people. They will diligently teach them to the next generation. And just on light of that, I think most of you might know by now that I'm basically English blood, but I'm 5 generations removed. But anyway, I didn't realise the principles that my mother brought us up with, because we haven't always been Seventh-day Adventists. I was a backslidden Methodist, Angela was a backslidden Catholic, basically. But it wasn't until we had our children and realised that we had the responsibility to nurture and bring them up, not the community. It was our job. So that's when we hunted for morals and principles for our children. It's a long story, but that's another story. But when we came into this message, I realised the Christianity that was in our home without even knowing it. We went to Methodist Sunday school, and you went to the Catholic Church in our younger years. But both of us, you had good Christian principles. But for myself, I realised what our mother had brought us up to without realising it. It was so instilled into the English culture that it came through from generation to generation to generation, instilled in the heart and in the mind. So they will diligently teach them to the next generation. They will live them, talk of them all day, from the rising in the morning till the retiring in the evening, dawn till dusk. And it may not be that they're actually reciting these, they're living them. They live the principles. These people will have those commandments in the forehead and in their hands. Notice those words. In their thoughts and in their actions, two places where the mark of the beast will strive for supremacy. God said, if you keep my commandments, they will strive for supremacy as well. It's interesting where the mark of the beast will make its way if we allow it to. Their homes will reflect these principles even outside the doors of the home to the gates of their properties, that all who enter in will feel the presence of God in that home and in that family. It does work. It works. Can you see why the first commandment is the greatest commandment? But to complete the law, Jesus continues back there in Matthew 22. It says, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. So did Jesus just summarize the last 6 commandments as he was speaking, or was that more word for word from somewhere else? Well, it was. And you can find that in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18. And I'll just use one verse here. Here it is up here on the screen. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against thy children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. So yes, it's a summary of the 6, but it's word for word. And the rest of that chapter in Leviticus 19 continues as to how to treat or how not to treat your fellow human being. So Jesus was not quoting anything new. He fully supported the law and identified himself with it. So how far-reaching is this law for our future? Well, you come to the end of the Bible, Revelation 22 verse 14, blessed are they that what? Do his commandments. Do. You act them out, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. Right through the gates of heaven is this law valid and essential. It does not change, at least from Exodus 20 in 1491 BC, right through until heaven and earth restored. In fact, it doesn't change right from before the creation of the world to eternity beyond. It doesn't, because they are God. These people will be keepers and doers of the law. Psalms 19 verse 11, moreover by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping of them there is great reward. And it was in Sabbath school as well. No, it was in the, I think, in the children's story, Elizabeth, you mentioned that there are always consequences to your choices. So now that we've identified love and law, the subject of our study is love fulfilling the law. So we'll spend a bit of time as we draw to a close on this. The ultimate fulfillment of the law, think about this, the ultimate fulfillment of the law is the love in the gift of Jesus Christ on the cross. That is the greatest gift. This is the heavenly gift that crowned the plan of salvation. It is divinity reaching down to fallen humanity. Zechariah chapter 13 verse 6, we have these words, and many of you will remember them well. What are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. The trauma that Christ went through, he can still say, through the trauma of my friends. I mean, wounded in the house of my friends. How could you say that? Luke chapter 23 verse 34 says, "Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." How do we comprehend that? That is love fulfilling the law at a divine level. But what about love fulfilling the law at a human level? Well, let's go back to 1 John, that little book that speaks so much on love. 1 John chapter 2. And it starts off, "My little children, these things write I unto you, that you sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. Hereby we do know him if we" what? "Keep his commandments." Verse 4, "He that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoso keepeth his word, in him verily is the love of God perfected. Hereby we know that we are in him." Now listen to verse 6. "He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked." Verse 6 is love fulfilling the law. "He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk as he walked." That's us fulfilling the law of God in our hearts. Jesus Christ loved humanity so much that he has sacrificed his life for humanity. Us, here, today. He lived the 10 Commandments, and sin is the transgression of the law, and Jesus never sinned. He lived the 10 Commandments. Verse 9, "He that saith he is in the light and hateth his brother is in darkness, even until now." Verse 10, "He that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is none occasion for stumbling." You won't stumble if you love God, keep his commandments, and love your brother. You will not stumble. And verse 11, "But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he go, because that darkness has blinded his eyes." So, in these texts here, we read that if we love one another, we will be in the light. If we hate our brother, we will be in darkness. So what relation does light and darkness have to do with the law? Well, there's a text that we often refer to that was very well known, and it's Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. "To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there's no light in them." So that way, that light and law will be equated with each other, right? But there's another verse, not so well known, but I want to bring this out, and it's found in the book of Proverbs 6:23, and it says, "For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is" what? It's so clear. "The law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way thereof." Jesus himself also refers to us as being the light in a dark place. Matthew 5:14-16, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that cannot be hid, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Law and light. So what does that mean, to shine your light? What does that mean? Well, the very next text tells us in verse 17, Matthew 5, verse 17, it says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." It means to live the law. It will shine. It will radiate out of you. So according to both Jesus and John, if we are a light to this world, we must be fulfilling the law. If we love our brother, we will be fulfilling the law. If we keep his commandments, we will be fulfilling the law. If we abide in him, we will be fulfilling the law. Jesus said he did not come to destroy his own law, but he came to fulfill it. So the love he gave, he himself fulfilled that law perfectly. And we are to follow in his steps and walk as he walked. And if we follow in his steps, we will be walking in the light and fulfilling the law. So is there anyone else in Scripture that records and links love with the fulfilling of the law? Yes, Paul does. And in Romans chapter 13, verses 8 to 10, I want you to turn there with me. Romans 13, 8 to 10. We have these words when you're ready. Owe no man anything but to love one another, for he that loveth another has what? Fulfilled the law. If you love one another, it's fulfilling of the law. Verse 9, for this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in the saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbour, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. Twice there you've got it in those verses. The strong emphasis in these verses is very similar to 1 John chapter 2. Here in Romans 13 it's very direct. If you love your fellow brother or your sister, you will be fulfilling the law. You will be. And in verse 9 identifies what law Paul is referring to, the Ten Commandments. He has a little bit more to say on this in Galatians chapter 5 and verse 14, and it's just this one verse, and it says, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself. And further on in that same chapter, in verse 18, it says, but if you be led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now that sounds real odd, doesn't it? If you are filled with the Holy Spirit, you will fulfill the law. You will not do away with it. Because if you are filled with the law, and if you are filled with the Holy Spirit, you will reflect or you will exhibit the fruits of the law. In Galatians 5 again, in the same chapter, verses 22 and 23, the fruit of the Spirit, you know them. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness and faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there's no law. Twice here Paul states that if you live the law, there is no law. That means that the law does not condemn you. You are living within the confines of the law, so it doesn't exist. Sounds double Dutch, I know. But the moment you step out of the confines of the law, it condemns you. Now, I want to give you an illustration of that. We had a very good friend, some of you may remember Dane Griffin. It was a long time ago. Dane, unfortunately, contracted cancer and is no longer with us. But I remember he came to New Zealand and talked to us years ago. And he said, on this subject, he said, I had an uncle who lived in the eastern side of the USA. He said, we were living on the western side and in California, and he said there was a law made in America that every driver had to wear a seatbelt. That law was coming into the US, that seatbelts were becoming compulsory. Dane contacted his uncle, and as he was talking to him, he says, oh, by the way, he said, you realise there's a law coming in that is mandatory to wear seatbelts. And his uncle said, thanks, Dane, but that law doesn't apply to me. And Dane said, of course it does. It applies to everybody in the country. He said, no, it doesn't apply to me. I already wear it. And that's what it means. The law doesn't exist if you're living in it. But the moment you step out of it, it does exist. You get the picture. This meant so much to Paul. Just 5 verses on, in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, he says, but bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. So what does that mean? The love that we have for Christ, we have for each other, but it's more than that. Bear ye one another's burdens. If someone's struggling hard, give them a hand. Whether it's physical, or whether it's spiritual, or whether it's emotional, give them a hand. Back in a couple of verses back in Galatians 5:25, it says, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. There's plenty here. 1 John 2:6 again, I repeat it, he that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk even as he walked. There's plenty of evidence. Fulfilling the law of love in love involves not merely keeping the law in a sense of refraining from committing sin, but also in actively doing good faithfully to advance justice and mercy. Fulfilling the law of love is much more than reading the letter of the law and exacting ourselves to keep it, but it will touch the heart. It will convert the heart and reach out to the hearts of others. So back to Paul again, writing to Timothy. He says, 1 Timothy 1 verse 5, it says here, now the end of the commandment is charity, out of a pure heart and out of a good conscience and of faith unfeigned. In other words, what Paul is saying here, to sum up all the commandments, they are a gift of charity. And if that charity is in the heart of the receiver, that heart will be pure, the conscience will be good, and the faith of the receiver will be unfeigned or sincere and genuine. Desire of Ages brings these words out, and it's beautiful. It says, love to man is the earthward manifestation of love to God. It was to implant this love, to make us children of one family, that the King of Glory became one with us. And when his parting words were fulfilled, love one another as I have loved you, when we love the world as he loved it, then for us his mission is accomplished. We are fitted for heaven, for we have heaven in our hearts. Isn't that beautiful? And there's a quote, and I remember it on Adventist Home, page 16, if we're going to be saints in heaven, we need to be saints on earth. In this whole message that we've studied here today, there is one short verse that really sums this whole study up. We could have started with this verse and it would have closed the whole thing up. It's very simple. It's in John chapter 14, verse 15. If you love me, keep my commandments. Those few words, in them there is love, there is law, and there is fulfillment. Just in those few words. So let's just look at some valuable insights as we draw this to a close. The 10 commandments, thou shalt and thou shalt not, are 10 promises assured to us if we render obedience to the law governing the universe. If you love me, keep my commandments. Here is the sum and the substance of the law of God. The terms of salvation for every son and daughter of Adam are here outlined. The 10 holy precepts spoken by Christ upon Mount Sinai were the revelation of the character of God and made known to the world the fact that he had jurisdiction over the whole human heritage. The law of the 10 precepts of the greatest love that can be presented to man is the voice of God from heaven speaking to the soul in promise. This do, and you will not come under the dominion and the control of Satan. There is not a negative in that law, although it may appear thus. It is do and live, even though it says thou shalt not. It is do and live. And if we do and live these 10 holy precepts, we will naturally draw others to Christ. As we're told in the end, people will come to us and they'll say, Carson, what is it that you've got? Because I want it. Claudia in Romania, what is it that you have? There's something about you. For us in New Zealand, your fellow brethren in South Africa, what is it that you have? But brothers and sisters, I'll say this, if you don't have it in you, it won't radiate out. It has to be within. Very important here on this closing text too, Desire of Ages, it says, those who ministers to others will be ministered unto by the chief shepherd. You give out, you will receive more. They themselves will drink of the living water and be satisfied. They will not be longing for exciting amusements or for some change in their lives. The great topic of interest will be how to save the souls that are ready to perish. Social intercourse will be profitable. The love of the Redeemer will draw hearts together in unity. And it was talking in Sabbath school. How do you go out the door here and tell those people how to find Jesus? And we should be able to say, come into the church, we'll show you Jesus. And the closing text is, again, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of the Lord. I just pray that this has been a blessing to you and a help and an encouragement. And we have a heaven to win and a hell to shun.